So in modern web applications, what we definitely want to do is to optimize that so-called startup time. Because contrary to server-side render pages where the HTML is already ready, in modern applications, in single-page applications, we first need to download a bunch of JavaScript that needs to be interpreted by the browser, and then only we can start the app which renders the HTML. Now, there's a metric that is called time to interactive, and we definitely want to optimize for that. So one countermeasure we can apply here is to not always load the entire application at startup. So basically to reduce the number of files we have to actually download, and we just want to use the necessary ones to get our application up and running. So for instance, right now, if I go to that application and the network tab, then I filter here for the JavaScript files, I do a reload, and we see the files get downloaded. Now, if I click that button here, we get to a new route of our application. But if you take a look below here in the JavaScript section, nothing actually changes. And the reason here is that the entire app gets already downloaded at startup. So for the purpose of this exercise, let's try to lazy load this part. So whenever we switch to this Nyan route, we actually just want to download at that moment the necessary JavaScript files to run and visualize it. So let's go back here. And let's take a look at the structure of our application. So if we take the folder structure here, we see that folder Nyan. And actually, I want that these two here get bundled into its own JavaScript file. And so that is necessary, and this is a mechanism called code splitting, such that later at runtime, we have here a dedicated JavaScript file just having these components here and just get interpreted and loaded at that specific moment. So how can we do that in Angular? Now in Angular, the Angular CLI already has a mechanism to create this on the fly. For instance, let's paste in this comment here. Now here we use the ng command, which is the Angular CLI. We generate a new module. We give it a name. Then we tell it should get hooked up to that app module. And then we also give it this route path. So we want to generate here a route, and that would generate a lazy loaded route that just gets loaded at the very specific moment when it is needed. Now, since we already have the entire code here and we don't want to override everything, let's try to do this by hand to see the various steps that are involved here. So first of all, what I need to do here is to create a new Nyan.module. This is because in Angular, the minimum unit that can be lazy loaded right now is a module. And so we need one of those. So we have here an ng module. I export class and we just call it Nyan module. And then we definitely have here a declaration section. We want that now that Nyan component, which right now is registered here to an app module, is now registered to that Nyan module. So I would fetch in that one here. And in the import section, we want to define here now a separate route. So right now, if I go to the app module, you can see here the route is defined inside here. We want to split that out into that Nyan module. Let's see how. So first of all, I need the router module. And we use the for child. Let's first import it here. Because this is now a child route and not in control of the entire application, but just a part of the entire routing system, right? And so the path here will be nothing. And we will see why. We have path match full because it's an empty string. And the component that should get loaded is obviously our Nyan component. All right. So with that, we should be already set up in our Nyan module. Now we need to do the lazy loading part. So let's go over to the app module. And first of all, we need to remove that hard reference here because we cannot directly import here a JavaScript file because otherwise that will get fetched into our main.js file. And actually what we want is to have that in its dedicated own bundle. And so we cannot have any hard references. And so let's remove here this Nyan component, which is registered anyway now in that Nyan module. And now we need to change obviously this line here below. Since we don't have the component at hand right now, but it will only be available at runtime later, we can use the load children property here. And starting with Angular 8, this takes a function where we can directly use now that import statement. And so I go here to that Nyan module, which we just created, because that's the part we have to lazy load. We cannot lazy load the component right now. And then we use here the callback, where we get here our Nyan module. Great. All right, so let's save this here. Now let's go here to our application. We can see here we have that main and files loaded. And now whenever I click here that Nyan button, you can see here that another JavaScript file gets loaded in. So the Angular CLI now has detected that we had here this load children with that import statement. And automatically for that module, it generates a new separate JavaScript bundle, which is called a mechanism called code splitting, and it loads it only when we actually navigate to that route. As you can see again, if I refresh here, we just have again our main files, and once I click, this necessary files get loaded in on the fly over the network. Our application module gets booted, and we see the image just as before.